Thank you for joining me again this evening. My name is Chris Majolo. I'm the campus manager at Black River Innovation Campus. I am joined this evening by Jenny Williams of Artisan Eats Vermont in Windsor, Vermont. Hey, Jenny, how are you?
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me. It's
Oh,
nice
yeah,
to talk amongst such chaotic times. So thank you.
absolutely. So Artisan Eats Vermont, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right. Well, as Chris said, my name's Jenny, and I started Artisan Eats Vermont. I'm heading into my official second season, third year in the running. And I started this business really because I've worked in so many restaurants my whole life. I was thinking about the other day, I've been in the food industry for 21 years, which seems crazy because I'm not even that old. But at some point, I don't know, I think maybe it took moving to Vermont. I really kind of found this passion for a drive of the local food source. There are so many people within our area that have this like love for the land and the animals that they raise and the vegetables that they grow, and also have kind of stepped into the world of wild foraging a little bit. And so I just got to a point where I was like, okay, I think I need to do this on my own and really be able to be creative in a kitchen. And thankfully, I have this beautiful community around me that also sees my vision and is willing to support me. And so it just kind of naturally came about with the idea of like feeding and supporting community, and led into doing some catering, and I have some wholesale stuff that I do. And in these kind of weird times that we're in, I've been putting out menus once a week to just see what I can get from local farmers and be creative with, because it's fun to not cook the same menu every single week.
Yeah,
I personally don't like to eat the same thing all of the time. And so it's just a little bit of an offering to change it up and to support local and get to know. I mean, I've just established so many beautiful relationships with farmers who have become friends and family. And it's really great to have that connection, to be able to like go to their land and see how they take care of these things with so much love. And I really believe that you can taste it in the food. And I am just the creator of like the final stages of these things, which has been kind of fun to come to. Like if you start with really good ingredients, you don't actually need to add a lot, but you have a chance to get, spend some time in the kitchen and break things down and put them back together and share food with people. So
yeah. No, I've always really appreciated and admired your kind of focus on local and what's growing here and who's raising what here. You have an awesome quiche business that I hear you running back and forth grabbing eggs from local vendors.
yeah.
Yeah, I know you get pork from Springmore Farm, who I worked with, John and Becky, when I was at Silo. That was always awesome to see that connection too. And then it just happens to be Earth Day today, so it just kind of worked out. We weren't really planning
Yeah,
for.
I know. How perfect.
Yeah,
And I really do believe, on not just like we're spoiled here in Vermont, where we exist, but I believe that growing gardens and knowing your food sources around you are really important. And the last 4 or 5 weeks of our life have kind of shown that. With you just really don't know what's going to be come your way. And when you have the resources at hand, it's like live the way our grandparents did, right? In some way, like
yeah,
maybe not your grandparents, but like probably most likely your great grandparents like knew how to save food and how to can and how to process what you grow here, because our growing season is so short, to be able to save that kind of thing year round. So you can like open your freezer and eat some ramp pesto in the middle of the winter time, and kind of just like, taste that deliciousness. So most of my relationships are kind of full circle with farmers. Like you said, John from Springmore, he delivers or picks up grain from silo and then delivers me that pork, and sometimes chicken, depending on what he has. But he was saying just the other day that right now he's like selling out of all of these things because people are just like going to his house and like essentially buying out his fridge.
Yeah.
Like, I hope that sticks around. And that we learn to kind of rely on our neighbors a little bit more, and to see that beauty of like people really supporting one another. Like, hey, I grew this and I grew that and I started this and here's some seeds that I don't need this year. And I think is what builds community. And it's just, I don't know, I'm super thankful. It's really all.
So behind your awesome little kitchen is the Path of Life garden, which I know you've been traipsing around in this afternoon. It's a place that's near to my heart. It's actually where my wife and I got married, and I tent back there, which you know because you made our cake, and hung out with us that evening. But you know, what's back there that you're finding this time of year, and talk a little bit more about just kind of like foraging in general and kind of that gardening that you mentioned.
Yeah, so I think that for most of us, if we just explore our backyards a little bit, we actually might see some things as weeds that are highly medicinal, for lack of a better term, and totally edible, like dandelion, for instance, right? You can eat the root, the leaf, and the flower. So you can eat it in all stages. And, you know, the root is best harvested in the spring or the fall to allow the energy to give it the growth to the flower in the summertime. And that's just like one of the things, right, that most likely everybody who has a lawn is going to see one of pop up. But the garden itself has really, over the years as I've grown with my foraging experience, I'm no expert by any means, but I do have some knowledge. It's like the things that pop up in the spring and certain times of year to start looking for some mushrooms. But most likely in your backyard, or if you take a walk down your road, you're gonna find patches of things like fiddleheads or wild ramps this time of year. I found some coltsfoot flower the other day, which grows usually by the riverbed. And in the summertime, it produces this really big leaf that kind of looks like a horse's hoof, and it's coltsfoot. But right now, the flower looks rather like a dandelion. It's a little bit more wispy, but it's actually very good for respiratory. How ironic.
Yeah.
You can pick it and kind of steep it in some honey over a few days and let it get bubbly, and then drink that honey, and it will help your lungs. But so right now, we're a little bit ahead of schedule this year, as we are like the last 5 or 6 years. Spring came a little early, which was nice. But I went and I picked some wild ramps or wild leeks. Kind of think I believe the difference between the two is that leeks are all white stems and ramps are purple.
Yeah.
Not 100% sure, but right now, patches are kind of, some of them are big, some of them are small. You do want to let the leaf get a little big and try not, usually you can pull up like right on this root part and it will pop out. What you want to try to avoid is, I purposely picked this one. There's some roots.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave the roots in the ground to allow it to just keep cultivating itself year after year. There's actually one spot in the garden that this year has many less leeks than what it has in prior years, which makes me understand that it's been over harvested, but it's also like very open to the public.
Yeah.
And they are, quite honestly, other than garlic scapes, one of my favorite vegetables across the board. Super potent. It's really fun to, I just eat the first few and kind of like breathe fire for 10 minutes it's spicy. But to process them down, and it's as simple as really just like harvesting them, washing the dirt off of them, and you can chop them really fine and mix them in a bowl with oil and freeze them in ice cube trays.
Mm-hmm.
And then pop those out, put them in a bag in the freezer, and you can use them all year long for the oil that is in your pan for any food that you're cooking. They're so aromatic, and the flavor when you freeze them doesn't really go away. It stays so vibrant. So I suggest that anybody living near a river, because most likely the water, the ramps grow near a source of flowing water.
Gotcha.
But also ramps and fiddleheads grow side by side with one another. So that's actually how I found this beautiful patch of fiddleheads. Up until a few years ago, I'd always eaten them, but never harvested them myself. And it's very important when foraging to do as much of your own research as you possibly can. I can sit here and tell you all day, but until you actually know, you shouldn't just pick things and eat them.
Yeah.
Because, there are hundreds of different kinds of ferns, and they're all considered fiddleheads. So the edible fiddlehead, there's two. The one that I know is the ostrich fern. Another good way to recognize it this time of year is by the arrow
Gotcha.
that it leaves. So this is the seed pod. Hello, Ted.
Hey, Ted.
Hi, who's that?
Hi, Ted. I'm Jenny.
Hi, Jenny.
And I'm Chris.
What's up?
Chris, you said?
Chris, yes.
Yep.
Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. What's going on?
So Jenny is talking about, right now she's talking about ramps and fiddleheads coming into season here.
It's the season.
Do you go out and wild forage, Ted?
I haven't. My wife has.
Excellent.
Everything.
What does she harvest when she's out?
She's done some mushrooming, but only with supervision.
Yes, well, I was just saying to Chris that how perfect of a time for you to hop on, that you really should do all of your own research before you consume anything at all.
Truly.
Very important. And, there are a lot of people in the Upper Valley who host classes and do things as far as wild foraging are concerned that you can hopefully soon we'll be able to sign up for those things and you can go on walks and learn. And so I was also just saying that I picked these little fiddleheads today.
Wow.
Could have used some more time, but I was wanting something to show people, and I took a trip to the river, and I fell straight on my butt right into the river, and out of the water come these little fiddleheads, like the plant was kind of submerged. So I was wondering, I don't really know science, if because they were under the water, which would, in a week or two probably be lower, if it's almost like a hydroponics type of thing where the ferns grew a little faster because they were underwater. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the temperature would be more steady there. They'd be less subject to freezing the ground on really cold mornings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if you can see this. There's like this U shape in the bottom of the fiddlehead.
Yep.
And it's very prominent. And so when you're out in the woods, what you're looking for is that U shape. And there's usually like this brown paper coating that's on the fiddlehead. And this is what the seed pod looks like, Ted. I'm not sure if you saw that or not. So these are ferns, and you can, like, this stands out right now in the woods so strongly. I think it's recommended that you don't eat anything within 50 feet of a roadway because of salting and things. You don't want to be consuming that. And so, right now things are really just starting to pop up, but you can also kind of catch the back end of like last fall's mushroom harvest. I've been finding a lot of old turkey tail and what I believe is like a red belted polypore. out in, but it's just good to like note these weird mushrooms that you're seeing on the trees that maybe right now are like kind of decayed, because most likely towards the end of summer or early fall, that is going to be a new mushroom that you can harvest. I know about 5 mushrooms really well. I've spent about 2 years really getting to know them, and I can identify them now with no problem. But mushrooms especially, you know, like if you pick the wrong fern, you're going to get an upset stomach. It's not going to harm you. But mushrooms can be very toxic and very deadly. So
now, if you take a fiddlehead too late, they can make you sick, can't they? If they're too far along, isn't there something along those lines?
you know, I've heard that. Like, I think what you want to do is you want to eat them at the point of them still being raveled up.
Right.
Within themselves. I'm not 100% sure on that. I've seen some people harvest fiddleheads when the top is still curled up in itself, but the stem is rather long. So I don't know. I'm going to have to do a little bit of research, like if once the leaf is out, what that does.
Yeah. What is a ramp?
A ramp is a wild leek, and
Okay.
this is what they look like.
Ooh.
So there's kind of this purpley, and they're so potent, it makes my whole entire kitchen smell for like a day and a half after you process them. But what I really love to do with them is just take them and freeze them, like almost make them into a pesto, chop it really fine, mix it with a little bit of oil, and freeze it in ice cube trays.
Yep.
And it's like stronger than any onion with smell and flavor, but it doesn't make you tear like a normal
That's
onion
interesting.
would. And they're just, I think that there's something about them that's just so fresh and delicious. It's like, we're coming out of winter and it's spring. Thank you. Tired of potatoes and cabbage. But I've also found that most things that come up in the spring, like dandelion and nettle and garlic mustard, that grow wildly around here and are a little bit bitter, but they're also meant to kind of help cleanse your system of all of the things that you've been eating that have been heavy all winter. So they aid with like your lungs or your kidneys or your liver to really help kind of put your body through this cleanse, which I just think is so cool. How provided for are we? It's great.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So Ted, do you live local in Vermont?
Right, I'm in Springfield.
Okay. I would imagine that there's places in Springfield that are loaded with ramps, usually riversides that kind of go a little dry in the summer and fall, but in the spring that are pretty rapid. You're gonna find them. And one way that I do is just, take a back road and drive a little slow, and you can just see right now these super vibrant green. There are some things like false hellebore and skunk cabbage that
Yes, I was thinking of that.
are also very bright green, but these leaves are smooth, and skunk cabbage and the things that you're not supposed to eat are actually very rigid. But these just by the tear of the leaf and the onion smell that comes off of them.
Okay.
And usually these will grow side by side with fiddleheads. So you find them all in the same area.
Well, I think I'll definitely keep my eyes open for those.
I don't know if you caught what Chris said, Ted, but my kitchen is in Windsor, so we're just the next town up. 2 towns away, I guess. And behind the kitchen, there's this place called the Path of Life Garden. Have you ever been?
Yes, I have.
That's where these came from. If you feel like taking an adventure, socially distancing, that's the great thing about foraging, right? Is you can be out in the woods by yourself with nobody else around. And so it's perfect for this weird time that we're in. just so you can get to know them and you know that they're a definite source. They are here by the river. I'm giving away my spot in Respite. And that brings up another point. When you're wild foraging, you really should only take enough in which you can consume. And the thing about things like leeks and fiddleheads is they always have a few weeks. So, you can go for a day or 2 or 3 and kind of find some different spots and pick them and save them. And these both are also very good pickled in vinegar to be saved. And I personally think that most people overcook fiddleheads. They're really good just blanched in boiling water for 30 seconds to a minute and then put into an ice bath, cut the cooking. So they're still a little crunchy and not mushy. But they will affect some people's stomach. You might get a little bit of a stomach ache from. I personally have never experienced that, but I have heard some people say that
I have to.
Yeah, if I eat them a little crunchy, then they give me a stomach ache, so I eat them mushy. The other thing I wanted to talk about, which is something I've never actually harvested on my own, but I want to find a good patch, is Japanese knotweed that grows like so rapidly on the sides of roads. Right now, at this stage, it looks like wild asparagus. But then it grows really tall into like these trees. And from what I hear the locals say, it came through after Irene came through, and like it really covered the beds of the rivers around here, the sides. And it can be cooked like asparagus. But you have to, again, the only sources I can really find are like right by the roadside. And you don't really want to eat food right from the roadside. But if you get it before it starts to kind of flower out, you can cook it just like asparagus. I've seen people chop it raw and like eat it that way. I've seen people pickle it. I've seen people cook it. I've seen people make tea out of it. So that's like next on my list to find a good patch of that.
Yeah, I had some Japanese knotweed, just kind of sauteed when I was in grad school down in Boston. We had a guy who came in and did a foraging class, and he brought in some. And I mean, it's an invasive, so it's very aggressive. But it's one of the cool things I've always thought about wildcrafting and foraging is that you have the ability. Some of these invasives are edible, and so you can do your part by clearing them out and eating them.
Exactly. And then also nettle is my nettle patch right now is like just tiny little leaves. There's dead nettle and there's stinging nettle, both which you can consume. I've consumed much more of stinging nettle, but in its baby stage, and like it when you run into it, right? Because it literally has its name for a reason. And it will kind of destroy your skin if you don't harvest it properly with gloves. But that also makes a very delicious pesto, and it's just super earthy, maybe a little bit along the lines of like a bitter spinach would be. And I've also recently started to discover some wild lettuces, which, again, do all of your own research. Don't just listen to what I say, but people literally make like springtime stews where it's like coltsfoot flower and dandelion root and burdock root and leeks and fiddleheads, and it's just like, I imagine that it tastes like straight earth, but
Sounds like it.
that you probably feel so good afterwards.
Now, Jenny, do you have any recommendations for like books or reading for people that do want to get into this?
I probably should, but I don't.
You can send them to me afterwards and I can put them in the comments.
Okay, that sounds great. I personally have never taken a book out on a journey with me. I've definitely read some articles and are part of some pretty cool groups on social media that, most people are just willing to share their knowledge. And when you start asking questions and you start doing a lot of research on your own, but I do have some book names written down that I will get to you.
Cool.
But I do think that it's a little bit of just, definitely do research and ask the questions to the people who know what they're talking about, and trusting also, like, this may sound like I'm a hippie, but talking to the plant to like ask it, like, are you safe for me or are you not safe for me? Like, your intuition is going to tell you a lot, but still do your research. Don't just go off intuition alone. But
The smell in the case of leeks would be a good tip off.
I mean, like, it's either going to smell really good and delicious, like onions, garlic, or it's like not. And it's like skunk cabbage actually stinks. Like,
Yes.
again, it has its name for a reason. So yeah, I don't know. I think that it's also just a really fun activity to like realize what is in your backyard that like, one, you're not spending money on, and two, it's a really knowledgeable skill to have, to be able to take it back and cook it. And like, that's the fun part. Like, oh, like I picked this and then I cooked it and now I'm eating it.
Have you ever done anything with sumac?
I have done some stuff with sumac. I think one of the funnest things to do is to make a lemonade out of it, because it's so tart and so sour that it really is like New England citrus. And that's simply just by steeping it in some water and almost doing like a maceration or a decoction out of it, and letting it sit for a little while, and then just maybe a little bit of honey or maple if you can't handle the tartness behind it. And I recently made some like raw cashew sumac bars that were kind of meant to be a take on like a lemon bar.
Cool.
And it's used in a lot of like za'atar, Middle Eastern spices. But it is fun to harvest and to just let it dry. First of all, it's beautiful, and it gives off such a tangy flavor, but it's really important to harvest it in the fall, when the buds, I'm not sure if that's the proper word to use or not, are like at their ripest, when they're really dark, red in color, because after they start to see a freeze or two, they'll start to get water and it can mold very easily. So, but sumac is fun to work with, and it's something you kind of like forget about but also is right in your face because you see it everywhere. But yeah, so to make teas and drinks out of it, and then to just like kind of add it as a zesty topper. What's nice about it is once they're dry, the berries just like crumble right in your hand. So you can either save it, or I just will hang it and dry it like above my sink and use it as I go. So.
Is poison sumac an issue?
No, poison sumac is a totally different being.
Good, I'm glad.
Poison sumac is a low bush on the ground that has kind of a whitish yellow flower to it. But that's a concern. When I've made sumac tea before, people are like, I'm gonna like break out. I can't. No, it's like, no. They're two totally different things. Most likely you have to be pretty far in the woods to find poison sumac. It doesn't really grow right on the roadside.
And the sumac that you've been talking about is the like, I don't know, it's like a small tree, kind of shrubbish tree.
Staghorn sumac.
With the clusters of red berries.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Again, you see them much along roadways, but also by riverbanks around here. And then, things start popping up like violets and wild strawberries and lots of mushrooms. And most greens that pop up you can eat too. Again, back to like the lettuce and like the garlic mustard. And people say garlic mustard grows in abundance. I've been able to find it one place in my life. And so I keep kind of just being like, where am I going to find a garlic mustard patch? Again, though, it's bitter, and most people. I don't mean to like put a stigma on it or anything, but bitter foods are not something that we're accustomed to here. So it can take a little bit of trying it and trying to figure out the way that you like it, whether it's like fried in a pan with butter or like made into a pesto or just mixed right into a salad.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Awesome. I know we're approaching the half hour mark, and I want to be conscious of folks' times. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add, or if Ted, you have any other questions you'd like to ask.
Oh, I just happened to see that there was a, what do you call it, storytelling hour.
Pretty much, yeah. It's our little community chat. We feature a different person from Vermont talking about stuff they're passionate about each
Oh,
week.
it's neat.
So, yeah.
So anyway, I just thought I'd check in. So hey, there you were.
Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, you do it every week.
Every week at 7:00 is usually when we go live. I'm not quite sure who's going to be on next week yet, but somebody will be. Yeah.
Could be most any topic.
Pretty much any topic. Yeah, we've had cryptocurrency. We've had therapeutic horseback riding. We've had a topic on, let's see, Silo Distillery talked about their hand sanitizer, their shift to producing hand sanitizer. Jenny came on today to talk about just being close to land and foraging and wildcrafting. And then we realized kind of that this was also Earth Day, so it worked out really well. And last week we took a week off just because it was spring break and folks tended to be pretty busy and wrapped up in having their kids home even more of a full time than they have been. So, but we're back on every Wednesday.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So awesome.
Well, Ted, if you decide to come to the Path of Life Garden, and feel free to knock on Artisan Eats door, and I'd love to take a walk with you, show you some stuff.
That's good. We're going to be over at Lowell Lake tomorrow,
Just there
kayaking and
Sunday.
hiking, and maybe I'm going to keep my eyes out for ramps, definitely.
Well, so I was actually just there on Sunday,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't see any. I wasn't in the water. I wasn't on a boat. I did hike the whole trail, and there's lots of mushrooms there. So if your wife does some mushrooming, it's a good place to pay attention for what will be coming in the fall. But up in the graveyard, there's lots of wintergreen.
Wintergreen. Yeah.
So you can like pick the leaves and or the berries. You gotta know there's one berry that has 2 dots on it, and that's the one you don't want to consume, but the one with the star is the one that you want to consume. And you can either eat the little red berries or pick the leaves and go steep them in some hot water and make yourself some wintergreen tea. Maybe soon, actually, I bet you'd find some morels there. That land is also loaded with food. It's one of the places I first discovered when I moved to Vermont. I was living in Chester at the time, and so it's definitely a good place to keep your eye out. And I'd be love to hear that you found some ramps there. I looked, but I didn't see any.
If you do take a boat over there, you know how it gets swampy at the edges. It's just loaded with parasitic plants.
Yes.
Pitcher plants and so forth. It's fascinating.
Oh, I love the pitcher plants. I love to see them. I just think they're so great. I bet there's some fiddleheads then there that maybe you might find some ramps. The trail doesn't really bring you by those spots. Like you kind of loop around.
Yes.
Because you're on the road for a little while and then you like go up. So be very curious to know, but I love Lowell Lake. It's a beautiful spot.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you have so much fun.
We shall.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jenny, for imparting your wisdom.
Thank you, Chris. It's always nice to see you.
Likewise. And I'll be in touch soon.
All right.
Cool.
Happy hunting. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.